Hi everyone, this is John Schwabish. I am going to show you today how to create a calendar heat map in Excel. This is not a visualization type that is really that complicated to make, but we're going to take what we can do in Excel that's pretty quick and easy and extend it a little bit. So the visualization here on the left is from a visualization that Nathan Yao made over at Flowing Data, that he has vehicles involved in fatal crashes in the course of a year, and it's just a heat map here. You can see with the calendar going down the left, and you have the darker squares for those days tend to be more on the weekends. In this visualization here, this is a new one from Via Velox, that it's the same approach. It's different data. It's the same approach of the heat map, but you notice that they've added this bar chart along the right side and a column chart here, or a column chart here along the bottom. And also that they've added, they have the calendar month names here, and also they're putting out the actual weeks with these dots in between. And so what I want to do is actually mimic this visualization approach. And so this is where we're going to end up in Excel creating all this. And it's really just a combination of using conditional formatting, using spark lines, and using some formulas to pull this together. And it's actually really quite easy to do. So I'm going to walk you through how to do this. I usually write these out in blog posts, but this just takes a few extra steps. So I thought I'd try for the first time to do a video. So here in this raw data tab, I have my raw data. I have for each day, I have the day of the month. I also have the month and a number. I'm using, I just have the data here all laid out, and I have the count, the number of, this is vehicle, same data that Nathan Yao had from Flowing Data, number of vehicles in a fatal accident per day. And I have that for every day over the course of the year. I've also done a little tab here where I have July is the highest number of counts for that month, and we're going to use that data a little while later. Okay, so I've sort of set this spreadsheet up a little bit. What I'm going to do is I'm going to have two sets of columns here. The first set's where I'm going to set up my calendar, and over here is where I'm actually going to make the heat map. So I'm going to start by setting up the calendar over here. So the first week in the year in 2015, the date here is where we start. So in Thursday of January of that year, that's 1/1/2015. So I'm just going to type that in. It's not with a formula, it's just that date, and I'm just going to type that in. And if I take this number and I drag it over, it's actually, you can see Excel is going to fill this in for you. So let me count the weeks here. So I'm actually going to start here with 0. So technically we're going to count that as a week, those first 3 days, and we're going to drag this all the way down. You can see I can copy and paste, but I'm just going to drag it all the way down, and I got to go one more to get to week 52. So if I grab this little square here and I just drag all the way down, it will extend that formula that I put in, which is just the B2 plus 1. So I'm going to do the same approach to get the dates in for the first full week here, 1/4/2015. Again, I'm going to drag it over, and that should fill in. That's a default activity in Excel. Now I'm going to use the same approach of using an equation to move these dates forward. So I'm going to use equals, and I'm going to highlight that Sunday. I'm going to add +7, 7 days. So Excel is going to recognize that this is a date. I'm going to again drag it over. You see I have the 3rd, the 10th, the 17th. And if I grab this little square, I can drag it down, I can copy and paste, or if I just double click, it's going to drag all those days down. And you can see that I now have the dates. And at the very bottom here, I end up in January, the first 2 days of January of 2016. I'm going to delete those because I just want to show the calendar for 2015. And so now I have 2015, it's all set up over here. Okay, so that's the first step. Now I'm going to actually plot the data. So I'm going to come over here. This is where my heat map is going to end up. So I'm going to use a VLOOKUP formula. So I'm going to look up, if you haven't used VLOOKUP, I encourage you to learn this function. It's really valuable. And if you want to just learn how to do it from Excel, once you type in VLOOKUP, you can click on these little hyperlinks and it'll bring you to the help menu. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to look up this date, so G2, comma, the thing I'm going to look for, in the raw data. So I'm going to look in this entire data shell here, this whole data table all the way down. I'm going to look for the counts. I want the number, so I'm going to do the 4th column here. So the 4th column is the counts, is in column D. That's the column, those are the data that I want. And then finally I need a range lookup. I want the I want the exact value here, so I'm going to put in a comma 1. A lot of people forget to do this last range lookup value, but I really think it's important to put that in. So I'm going to hit control there, or return there, and I get 241. I'm going to fix this data table. So I'm always going to look in the same data table. I don't want that to change. So these dollar signs are these relative and absolute references in Excel. If you are on a PC computer, you can hit F4 to add those. If you're on a Mac computer, the way I am right now, you can use Command T. So if I have that in there, I can copy, or I can again drag over, and let's just test and make sure this formula is working right. So 241, 176, and 259. 241, 176, and 259. So that looks like it's working correctly. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this down, and I'm just going to get these counts all the way over, and I'm going to drag them down to match them up. And right there, and you can see I get NAs for those last 2 days. And so you can see that I have that VLOOKUP, and because this data array was fixed with those dollar signs, that never changed. And so all I did was vary the cell I was looking for, always looking in the 4th column and always getting the exact match for that date. So now I'm all set. I've got the calendar set up. So here's the calendar, and here's the data values for each of those days. So now I'm going to come over here a little bit. I'm going to slide over just for a moment, and I'm going to actually create the heat map. And I've written about this on my blog at policyviz.com a number of different times, but I'll show you how to do it here in this video. So I'm going to highlight all the data. In the Home tab, hit the conditional formatting menu, and I'm going to go down to color scales and to more rules. Now, I'm using my Mac, Excel 2016 on my Mac. These menus look almost exactly the same on the PC version, and this visualization can be made really in any version of Excel starting in 2010. So I'm going to create a heat map here just by using colors. I'll just pick blues, just going from a light blue to a dark blue. And you see lowest value to highest value, and I'm going to hit OK, and now I have the heat map is essentially created. Now, if we go all the way back to the example here, you'll notice that there are no numbers shown in this calendar. So how do we get rid of those numbers? Well, it's actually just a little trick. So if you right-click, go to Format Cells, and you can see there's a keyboard shortcut here. This is my favorite Excel keyboard shortcut. On Macs, it's Command 1. On PCs, it's Control 1. So if I hit that, and you've probably seen this Format Cells menu. If you go all the way down to Custom, in the Type box, we can delete the general, whatever's in there, which is probably the last thing you use, whatever's in there. And if you use 3 semicolons, you can see I've already used it, fills in, and hit OK, it actually hides the numbers. They're still there. So you can still see my formula is still there. I can hide those numbers though. So the numbers are still there, but they're hidden. Okay, so that's the first part. Now we have the heat map. Okay, so what about, let's go to the second part. How do we get these bars over on the right side? Well, we're going to need a couple things. First, we need the data in there. So we need to create a sum. So very simply, I'm going to sum up the data values. And you can see now it's extended that little formatting. So I'm going to come back up. I'm going to make that a number. I want to see it. For the time being, I want to see it. And I'm going to double click. If I just double click, it just drags it all the way down. And notice how it stopped here because there's no cell right here. So when I did that double click down, it stopped right there. So I need to go down one more. And again, I can use the same technique, conditional formatting. So I'm going to highlight all those data, conditional formatting, and here I'm just going to use data bars. And for the time being, I'm just going to use the default. They have some default colors here. I could pick my own, but let's just use the default blue. And you can see now I have that little column chart, but the numbers are still there. So again, I can use that same formatting trick I just used. Go to Custom, type in the 3 semicolons, and hit OK. And I've got a nice column chart. I can double click this column here to give a little more space. And I want to add a little more space here, so I'm going to insert another column, and I'm just going to tighten this up just a little bit to give it a little more space. But now I have that column chart, and I'm all set. Okay, what about the column chart at the very bottom? Well, it's the same sort of thing, except that we're not going to be able to use conditional formatting. So let me show you why. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to sum. So here I'm going to be summing by day. I want to make sure I get all the way up to the top. And I'm going to copy over across those columns. And again, need to get that number format fixed. So let me get that up there. Now I see the numbers. So now if I use my data bars from conditional formatting, you see this isn't going to work. I'll use these green ones so you can see it. But what it's doing is it's making these bars horizontal, which is fine, that makes sense. But what I want to do is create this chart right here. So I can't use conditional formatting. Instead, what I'm going to use is sparklines. So sparklines became available in Excel 2010 on the PC, so I can use the sparklines here. So I'm going to go to my Insert tab. Next to the Charts menu is the Sparklines menu, and I'm going to select Insert a Column Chart. It's already filled in the data range because I've selected those cells. So it's already picked that. I'm going to say where to put those sparklines. I'm going to put them in this row right below. And I'm going to hit OK, and I'm going to hit OK again. And you see what I get here is one column, one bar for each of these numbers. And so that's not really going to work. But what I can do is I can do a couple of things to get essentially a column chart in the cells. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select these cells first where I have the bars. I'm going to go to my Home tab, and I'm going to merge those cells. And it's given me now just one bar. It's just, you notice how it's highlighted now, just that first value. Well, I can actually fix that. So I'm going to go back over here to edit the data. And instead of just giving it that one data value, I'm going to extend it all the way across to pick all those columns, and I'm going to hit OK. And see, I'm close here. Now I have the column chart. So I did that merge, and then I had to redo the data to give me the column chart, but notice how it's going up. And I really want it, just like the original did, how it was going down, even though it's a positive number, I want to do the same thing here. And so there's just a little quick trick here, is I take the sum and I'm just going to multiply it by -1. And then I'm going to drag this across. And it's going to give me that -1. Now what about the yellow bar? So the largest total here is, I'm going to highlight that yellow bar. So I can highlight the sparklines. I can go into Sparkline Design. I'm going to pick the low point to highlight it, and the sparkline color, go into marker color to low point, and let's just make that orange. And now I have that one highlighted. And here again, you can't hide this row. You can't hide this row. If you try to hide this row, the sparklines disappear. So I'll show you if I hide it, they disappear. So I'll undo that. But again, if you use our little trick, or Command 1 or Control 1, custom menu, 3 semicolons, those numbers hide, and then you can actually squeeze this column, this row all the way down. I have it at 2 pixels there. Okay, and what I'm going to do here, I have the orange column here is the biggest one. I'm going to do the same thing at the end of the day for July, but we're not quite there yet. We have a couple things we need to do. So let's go back. Where are we? We've got the basic heat map. We still have to add these lines. We have the column, the bar chart on the right, and the column chart at the bottom. So there's only a few things left to do. We have to get these numbers sitting here for each of the weeks. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to use a formula. And the formula is actually going to be a little complicated, so I've hit it over here for myself, and I'm going to grab it, and I'm going to paste it into my heat map on the week. And I'm going to right align it, and then I'm going to drop it all the way down. Bring it all the way down to the bottom. And so you can see I have numbers here, 1, 5, 10, 15. Okay, so let me break down this formula for you a little bit. It's a somewhat complicated formula. You can get this Excel file if you'd like, so that you can explore the formula, but essentially what it is an if statement, and within the if statement is an or statement and then an and statement. So let's look at the bigger or statement. So the or statement says if B2 equals 1, so B is the week, is the numbers that we set up at the very beginning. So if it's equal to 1, and and these things are true. So in this and statement, if B2 is not equal to 0, and this thing is true. So this says this is an integer function which takes the number, divides it by 5. So let's take the number 5. So B2 right here, if it takes it, divides by 5, integerizes it, that's a 1, multiplies it by 5, it's equal to that number, so again, equal to that cell, then you're going to do this thing. Okay, and the thing is, give me that value, so give me the number 5. If it's false, give me this dot, and the dot I just picked out of the object menu in Excel. And when I do that and drag that down, I get all of these round numbers. So that integer function is really helpful. Well, what about doing one more trick to get these 0, 1, 0, 5? One way to do that is to highlight all of these cells. Again, format the numbers by Command 1, Control 1, or right-clicking. I'm going to go into the custom menu, and I've actually set up a little formula here. And this says if the number is less than 10, give it a 0 and then the number. Otherwise, just give it the number. So I've already set up that I have 1, 5, 10, 15, 20. Those are my numbers. So if the number is less than 10, put a 0 to precede the number. So I should have 0, 1, and 0, 5 as soon as I hit OK. And there I go. I have 0, 1, and 0, 5. Okay, what about the final pieces? So let's go back. We now have this column. Now we need to plug in the months, and then we need to add the line. So let's add the months. So this is where I make things a little more manual, so I'm actually just going to type these in. So here's January. I can go down and explore. Here's February, and I'll just go down and show a couple more, and here's March, etc., etc. And then, of course, I can format these things. Maybe I make them a different font. Maybe I clean these up and I center them, whatever I want to do to pull them together. Okay, now I need to add these lines. Okay, so how do I add the lines? Well, the lines are actually quite simple. So here's the first line I need to add. Here's that first horizontal line. That's going to be January. These are the days in January. I'm going to use this underline option in the border option in the font menu. And if you go into the border option, first thing you need to do is set up what you want to draw, the color and the thickness of the line. So I'm going to come in here, line color, and we set that to white. I'm also going to change the style. I'm going to make it a lot thicker. I'm just going to go down in here. And I could go in further into the More Borders menu and even pick a more specific size if I wanted, but this is good for me. And so I'm just going to draw this line across. And you can see, if I get off that line, that I have that white line there. Same thing, I can go down to February. And now I can actually just press this button now that it's all set. And so I can hit that. And I'm going to do March as well. So it's 3 days at the end of March. And then I'm going to move over to these 4 days at the end of March. And I can just keep going. And you see now I have this little gap here. Well, that's just now just a left outline, a left border. And so I can go all the way through. This is a part that is manual. There's no doubt that this is the manual part of creating this visualization. But once you've set it up, you really don't need to do it again because these are fixed. And I'm just going to do this one. And so you can see that I have these months set up. It only takes a couple of minutes, and you can get the file if you want so that you can create it yourself. And here's April, and here's May. Okay, so now we're closing in. We're almost set. So what's left? Well, I want to highlight some of these bars to be orange for the largest month, which is going to be July, because as I showed earlier from the month totals, it's July. So here is July for these rows, 28, 29, 30, 31, and 32. And so I'm just going to go right in here, and I'm going to change the colors of those bars. Now I have to go into the formatting rule and change the color here. I'll make that orange, and I'll hit OK. Because I don't want to remake the conditional formatting bars. I just want to change the color. If I were to go in and make new bars, they might look a little bit different. They might scale. So now I'm highlighting the July, and of course I would end up putting those lines in. Then last few things. So I can center my days. I can shade those if I want. And then I might want to make these squares. So if we go back to the original, you can see that the Velox graph, those are rectangles. In the flowing data graph, they're squares. I like the square look. So I'm going to go back to here, and I'm just going to set my pixels. And I can pick, let's say, 25 pixels. And now I'm going to select all the way down, and I'm going to set these to 25 pixels to make it square. Of course, I could select the menu to do this, and you can see that they're now square. And here are the lines. And if I go up to my view pane and turn off the grid lines, I have a nice looking calendar. And I could go in, of course, and add other things. I could highlight the tops. I could add outlines around each of the days if I wanted. I could play with the spacing here if I want this closer or further away. I can change the colors, of course, of all this, and I could change the font. But hopefully you'll get a sense of how to create this graph. It's actually fairly simple. It's just a lot of little steps. It's conditional formatting. It's a VLOOKUP function for the days, followed by a conditional formatting in Excel to use the color scales. It's conditional formatting data bars. It's spark lines and a merge cell at the bottom. And then it's a sort of longest function here, which of course you don't necessarily need. You could do this by hand. It's not that big of a deal, not that many days to do, but I used a function here, and then you're all set, and you can copy and paste this into your favorite picture editor or put it out into the world. So that's how you create a calendar heat map. I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, please look me up at policyviz.com or on Twitter. Thanks so much for listening.